The engagement party, that's like the party you never want to be invited to. So, it sounds nice, right? It's probably blurred behind me because I'm writing a book right now, but I do have a whiteboard and I use it for a bunch of things, for like very basic things like, does every character in this book have a name that starts with the same letter? Visualize it. No, they don't, those kind of things. But one of the things I use on the board is kind of a three kind of division on the board. One is a list of a bullet point of what I want the reader to know. Then what I want the characters to know that the reader doesn't know yet. And then the third is what I know. And and then I kind of try to figure out how I weave those in so that it's not nothing happens, nothing happens, and then huge, like at the very end, this happens and it's all explained and it's tied up in a bow and it's done, right? Like, how can I use the secrets? There are always secrets. How can I use the secrets along with this feel of justice denied or something that needs to be solved and put it all together? And I find that either killing or making someone disappear is kind of a great way to get a group of people that either have mutual interests or don't, and put them on the same page looking at the same thing. And once you do that, you can kind of broaden the characters, right? Because everybody will look at that incident in a very different way and have a different reaction to it. And if they're all having the same reaction, your characters probably aren't right. Like, how do you do it so that it feels like everybody's having an authentic, their own reaction to it? We'll all meet on this private island in Maine and we'll celebrate an engagement of two of the people that all went to college together. Sierra is the one who didn't go to college. She didn't go with all these people. She's gone with a friend who was one of the group. The engagement party has some horror movie vibes, right? Like, I grew up in the 80s. So Friday the 13th, there are all of these, the Scream movies, I've watched them numerous times. Like, they have a certain feel to them where, people always say, well, these people in the horror movies, they did something stupid. They did XYZ. And one time a writer, and I wish I remember who it was, said, yeah, but they don't know they're in a horror movie. Right? Like, they are reacting like you would react. Like, when my alarm in my house goes out, do I immediately call the police or do I walk out into the family room assuming the pets knocked something over? Right? That's probably not a smart thing to do when your alarm goes off, but that's where your human nature doesn't go to the worst thing possible is there's a serial killer in my house. That's not where my brain goes, right? Your brain goes to something else. And I wanted Sierra is the character that's always like, she's very practical. Like, do you guys not see how bad this is? She's that character, right? She's of course we're not going upstairs if somebody's chasing us character. Of course we have to get off this island. I don't care if I have to swim. So she's the person who is not bound up in what happened in college a decade ago that is tipping everything off. So she is the voice of reason. Like, she is who I think we would all want to be, which is, we're leaving there are dead people on the island. We are leaving the island. Whereas I think in reality, people who are in the middle of this are trying to figure out what's going on. And, I think we all would react differently. But the idea of characters in a horror movie or horror book don't know they're in that book. They think they're just in regular life. I thought was a fascinating idea and kind of brilliant when the author said it. So when I was writing the book, that's how I was trying to approach it. Like, as everybody with their background and what they know of the secrets and what they know happen, how would they really react? And I think the practical person like Sierra is, let's get out of here. I think you can use flashbacks. I think you can use like dual timelines. Some people are incredibly good at that, where, I'm in 1970, now I'm in the present, those kind of things. All of those can give you a peek. But I think if the person who has disappeared or died isn't on the page, then everybody else has to define them, right? Like, everybody through their lens has to define them. And I didn't want Emily Hunt to be perfect, right? I didn't want her to be the pretty, perfect college senior who everybody loved and did. we see that all the time on TV when people get missing, right? Like we don't let them have any kind of dimension at all. They have to look a certain way. They have to they have to, all of those things, and for the public to really, really care, right? Like we have to. That's how we engage, right? They package it, I think, to us so that we care. But if you're in the thing and you know the person and you know they're not perfect, Emily Hunt is not perfect, was not perfect. Um, but that doesn't mean she deserved to die, right? Like part of what I was trying to do in that book was show she was X person at 21, but she never got to be anything else. That is the tragedy, that she never got to be anything. Somebody decided that is all she ever gets to be. And people who didn't like her will say she was pretty unlikable. People who didn't know her or people who loved her, I think, start to like make her more perfect than she was, right? Because that's what we have to do in our mind to be able to get through it. So that's what I tried to do in the book, was show she's not perfect, but there are people who look at her in different ways and know different pieces of her. And she could have been somebody different, but we'll never know because that was taken from us. I generally, again, I'm very lucky because I've worked with the same editor for a long time. So she doesn't need to see 3 chapters. She always, when I'm pitching a book to her, she's like, I know you know how to write. I need to know if I think the idea can go somewhere. And with What the Night Wife Knew, and really almost all my books, I usually know the beginning, right? I know kind of the main person, like what their thoughts are and what the thing is that sets the book off. And in What the Wife Knew, it's a woman who blackmails a famous hero, doctor, perfect guy into marriage because she wants to ruin him because she knows who he really is. And when I'm writing that, this is the first book. What the Wife Knew is the first book I ever wrote that's first person. Every book before that was third person. And the reason I did it, and it was a little hard to adjust. When you're used to writing third person, all of a sudden it's not just a matter of all of a sudden it's I, right? Like you have to write it in a very different way. I wanted to because she blackmailed him into marriage. So if the reader was going to care at all about her or her story, I thought I needed to be in her head. I thought the reader had to be dragged into, why is she doing this? What are the pressures on her? Like there are a lot of things you can do. Why would that be the answer on what you do? And first person allowed me to do that, and it allowed me to look at things like, frankly, family dysfunction, like on an extreme level, the things we do because we've been programmed to do it, or we're trying to make people happy, or we're looking for a family that we really don't have, or we're trying to fill whatever. And I was able to do that with Addison because there's a reason she's doing. I mean, there's a reason she wants him specifically to be ruined, as something in his past, but there's a reason she chooses this route. And that was a lot of fun. And going in her head also allowed me to be, Addison's a very, I would say, like, sarcastic, right? She's a survey, like she has a certain way of viewing things that allowed me to hopefully put them on the page in a way that some people might chuckle and say, yeah, I would say the same thing in that situation, and it's in her head. And that was a lot of fun. Awesome. Is anybody really as great as we like shore them up, right? Like we put them on this pedestal and they're not allowed to do whatever. But this guy, he is he's a pediatric surgeon. So a lot of people depend on him. He has a family. He has 2 kids. There's a whole life around him, and they need him to be who he pretends to be. They need him to be that way. She needs people to know that he's not. And there's a real life kind of wild case where this guy, he's a doctor and he's supposed to be this brilliant scientist doing this special surgery, and he's a complete fraud. And you find out because he gets in a relationship with a woman, and they're going to get married, and he convinces her that the Pope is going to do their marriage, like stuff that sounds what kind of outrageous, but when you see it through her eyes, you can see why she bought into this kind of amazing man thing. In the end, he was a fraud. He was already married. He already had kids. It was all garbage. So I wanted to take that kind of idea of kind of somebody that we've all decided is this like paragon, and what happens if you take you take away and you show that he's not a paragon. It's not just whatever he did in the past to put him there. It's all of the collateral damage that happens to the kids, to his partner doctors, to his family, all everything that falls apart when you want it to fall apart, but you don't really see what's going to happen. Because a lot of times what will happen, I'm not an outliner. I'm not, there's the whole like, are you a plotter or pants? Or are you an architect? You're, a gardener, all of those things. I know what I think the book's going to be, but then I have to let myself write it. Like I've got to just let myself start writing. And when I do, things happen. Like in What the Wife Knew, there's a character, Addison's mother, who you're kind of hearing about because she's thinking about her, et cetera. She played no role at all when I was originally trying to figure out what the book was. And then I was like, I need the mother. Like that is part of why Addison is who she is and why she does the stuff. So it kind of like comes out as I go. And that last, I'm usually like, I know who the person who killed is and I know why. But getting there, and sometimes as you get there, you're like, well, that's not quite why, or that's not the only person who did a bad thing. Like how I love that piece where I am kind of discovering like the complexity, the bigger part of the book than what I thought it was while I'm writing. And I'm a person that when I write and it's done, like all the thrillers are standalone. So when it's done, it is done. It is out of my head. Like it's like I have dumped everything I could possibly think of in this world on the page and I have nothing else. And then I get copy edits and I'm like, I wrote this. Wait, I wrote this, right? Because you get into this, I get into this like fugue state where dialogue starts, like I know that I'm understanding the book once I get to the point where dialogue starts running in my head, right? And I'm waking up and I will email myself something that I want to remember when I get up, or I'll write myself a note. That's when I know the book's really in my head, and that's when it becomes way more interesting, because then it's not just X happens and Y happens, Z happens. It becomes way bigger, and then I discover the things I didn't know were going to happen.